Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to show you how to make the Calypso baby blanket. Now obviously you can customize this so it is a much larger blanket or a much smaller blanket depending on what size you're looking for, and I will give you all of those measurements as we go through the tutorial. The blanket that I have made here is a crib size blanket. So I've worked back and forth like this. However, even though we're working back and forth like this, my blanket is flipped, so it's actually, this would be the bottom and the other side is the top. So as we're working, I'm actually working the length of the blanket instead of the width. Just keep that in mind if you use my measurements and my numbers for casting on your foundation, chain row, and things like that, that my blanket is actually flipped on its side. So here is the Calypso crib blanket. This blanket is super cute. It is not difficult. The only tricky part is remembering which rows, how they start and how they finish. Otherwise, the main pattern is the same. I have used a 3-weight yarn and a 5mm crochet hook for this project, but of course you can use whatever size yarn and crochet hook that you'd like. Just note that the measurements I give you are based on a 3-weight yarn and a 5mm crochet hook. So enough talking, let's get started. For this tutorial I am going to use the Willow Yarn's wheels, and this is a thinner weight yarn. It is 70% acrylic, 30% wool. It is a 3-weight yarn, and this colorway is called Flora. It is a self-striping yarn and the colors are super pretty. With this yarn I'm going to be using a 5mm crochet hook. In one cake of this you get 377 yards. I recommend having at least 5 or 6 if you're using this type of yarn, and this hook, as it is somewhat of a yarn eater. For this tutorial I am going to just chain 29 for my sampler, but for the actual blanket you will want to chain 179. So start with a slip knot on your hook and chain 179. Going to chain my 29. Once you have your chain, we're going to work back into the 3rd stitch away from the hook. So you skip 2, and in that 3rd one we're going to work a half double crochet. We're going to skip the next chain, and in the next we're going to work a half double crochet V-stitch. So you half double crochet, chain 1, half double crochet back into that same chain. We're going to skip the next, and into the next we're working a half double crochet V-stitch. So you want to work that all the way down, the half double crochet V-stitch, skip 1, half double crochet V-stitch, all the way down your chain. I've worked down my chain. I have 2 chains left, so I've just worked that last half double crochet V-stitch. I'm going to skip 1, and in that very last chain I'm going to work 2 half double crochets. So not a V-stitch, just 2 half double crochets right into that last chain, and that is row 1. Row 2, we are going to chain 3, turn our work, and into that first stitch right here we're going to work a double crochet. Chain 1. You're going to want to find the chain 1 that was part of your V-stitch. So if you go to the first V-stitch, this first row of V-stitches are a little bit tricky to find. So row 1 and row 2 are the most difficult since you're establishing this pattern. But if you hold your work up and find that larger space, that is where you worked your V-stitch in. So you want to work right in between those 2 half double crochets. And we're going to work 3 double crochets together into that space. To do that, we yarn over, put your hook in, pull up a loop, yarn over, go back through 2. That's 1. Yarn over, go into that same space, pull up a loop, yarn over, back through 2. That's 2 together, and 1 more, yarn over, put your hook in that same space, yarn over, back through 2, and now we have 4 loops on our hook. We can yarn over, pull back through everything. We're going to chain 1 and move to the next chain 1 space from our V-stitch and do the same thing. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, back through 2, yarn over, pull up a loop, back through 2, yarn over, pull up a loop, back through 2. When you have 4 loops on your hook, you can yarn over, pull back through everything, and chain 1. So you're going to work this pattern for row 2 into every chain 1 space from your half double crochet V-stitches. Always remember to chain 1 after your little double crochet 3 together. That secures it, and it also helps us jump to the next space. I have 1 more V-stitch, so I'm going to go ahead and work my 3 double crochets together right into that stitch, or that space. Chain 1, and now we're at the beginning, and in the turning chain we want to work 2 double crochets together. So like I said, this first row 1 and 2 are more difficult than the rest of the pattern as far as starting and ending, just because you're working off of the foundation chain, and that first row is really setting everything up for the rest of the pattern. So you should have these 2 stitches here. You want to find the top of them, and I'm going to work half a double crochet, yarn over, go right back in that same chain or stitch, back through 2. Now I only have 3 loops on my hook, so I'm going to yarn over, pull back through all 3, and that is a 2 double crochet together. And that is row 2. Row 3, we're going to chain 2, turn, find your first chain 1 space, which is right here, and we're going to work a half double crochet V-stitch. So for this pattern, you're working into the chain 1 spaces, skip to the next chain 1 space, and work a half double crochet V-stitch. Skip to the next, half double crochet V-stitch. So from here on out, we're only working into those chain 1 spaces, either the chain 1s after your double crochet 3 together, or in the chain 1 space from the V-stitch. And the only thing that is different is how you start and finish these rows. Otherwise, the main pattern is pretty much the same. I'm at the end of row 3 now. I've got this chain one space here, so I'm going to go ahead, work my half double crochet V-stitch into it, and then find the turning chain and just work a half double crochet into the top of the turning chain. And that is row 3. For row 4, we're going to chain 3 and turn. We're going to look for that first V-stitch and work into that right there, and we're just going to work a double crochet 3 together, chain 1, skip to the next V-stitch and work into that space in between, and work your double crochet 3 together, all into that same space, chain 1, and continue all the way along. I have worked down my sampler. I have one more V-stitch here, so I'm going to go ahead, work my 3 double crochets together, yarn over, back through everything. Since this is my last one, and this is row 4, now I'm not going to chain 1 at the end of this 3 double crochet together. I'm going to find the turning chain and work a double crochet into the top of that turning chain to finish row 4. For row 5, we're going to chain 2, turn, and we're going to work another half double crochet V-stitch row. So you can kind of see now we're alternating the half double crochet V-stitch row with a 3 double crochet together row, and then another half double crochet V-stitch. We just did a double crochet 3 together, and now we are on a half double crochet V-stitch. So rows 2 through 5 are what you're going to repeat. So let's work row 5 together. We're going to work a half double crochet right into that first stitch, and now we're going to skip over to this space here in between our 3 double crochets together. This space right here, we did not chain 1, so we're just working a half double crochet into the top of that stitch right there where we chained out of. Now we can work into our chain 1 spaces all along. Yarn over, work your half double crochet, chain 1, another half double crochet into that space for your half double crochet V-stitch. Skip to the next chain 1 space and work a half double crochet V-stitch. And you're going to continue doing your half double crochet V-stitches into each chain 1 space all along for row 5. I'm at my last chain 1 space. I'm going to work a half double crochet V-stitch into that last chain 1 space. There is where we started the turning chain, and I'm going to work 2 half double crochets into the top of that turning chain. And that is row 5. So what you want to do is repeat rows 2 through 5 over and over and over again. The only main difference being in the way that we start a row and the way that we finish a row. The actual stitches and the pattern in the body of the work is going to be the same. We're always working into those chain 1 spaces. I have worked this blanket up using 4 full cakes of yarn. For the last 2 rows, I had to break into this last one, but this last one I'm going to use mainly for the border. I've ended on a half double crochet row. Here's my double crochet cluster row, and then that last row I ended doing the half double crochet V-stitch. For the border, I am not going to fasten off at all. I'm going to keep using this yarn. If you're using a different color for your border, then you can go ahead and fasten off the color that you've been working with, the yarn you've been working with, weave in your tail, and just join to that last stitch with a slip stitch. For the border, I am going to work a single crochet row for round 1. Doing that, in each corner I'm going to work 3 single crochets to get around that corner. So when you start, you're going to want to chain 1 and right into that same stitch. I'm going to go right here. So I'm kind of cheating it just to get this corner done. Here is my last half double crochet. Because that's not a very tall stitch, I'm just going to work right back into the same stitch where that half double crochet came out of, and I'm going to put 3 single crochets into that stitch. If you want to mark that first stitch with a stitch marker, it will be helpful so you know which stitch is that first one when you get back around, since it's not a very tall or obvious row start. Once you have your 3 single crochets, you'll see that you have stitches running along the side of your blanket. For the double crochet rows, I like to put 2 single crochets into the side of those rows so there's not too much pull on the blanket, but everybody's tension is different, and so if you find that 2 single crochets is too little or too much, you might just have to play around with how many single crochets you use all the way down the side. But just try to space them evenly and stop every once in a while, take a look at it, see if there's bunching. If you have too many single crochets, you might have to take some out. If it's too tight and it's pulling, add some extra ones in. You can either go into the spaces if that's easier, or you can try to work right into the stitches. I am just going to go into the spaces since there is a natural space in this pattern anyway. And that time I worked into a stitch, so it's just sort of personal preference. However the blanket is working up for you, whatever you prefer visually as you're working down the sides. And just work a single crochet as evenly as possible all the way around the blanket. When you get to the corners, put 3 single crochets in that corner stitch. I have worked a single crochet all the way around. Here are my 3 corner single crochets from that first corner. There's my slip stitch. I'm going to ignore that and go into the very first single crochet that we did and just slip stitch. You should have those 3 stitches that you did for the corner, and we want to work into that middle stitch. I'm just going to go in and slip stitch, and that is our actual corner. So on the corners, that middle single crochet of the 3 is your actual corner, and it is the stitch where you want to work your next corner for this round. So I've just slip stitched to get to that corner. This is round 2. I'm going to chain 3, and we're going to work a cluster. So yarn over, put your hook in to that same stitch, pull up a loop, yarn over, back through 2, yarn over, pull up a loop, back through 2. You have 3 loops on your hook and 3 double crochets essentially. Yarn over, pull back through everything. We're going to chain 3 for the corner just to get around, and then into that same space right here, we're going to work another cluster. Yarn over, put your hook in, pull up a loop, back through 2, yarn over, put your hook in, pull up a loop, back through 2. Now we only have 2 double crochets. We want to match what is on this side. So I need to do another one. Yarn over, put your hook in, pull up a loop, yarn over, back through 2. We now have 4 loops, yarn over, pull back through everything, and that gives us a little bit of a matching cluster. In between the clusters, just like in the pattern, we're going to chain 1. I'm going to skip 1 single crochet, and into the next work a double crochet cluster, just like we did in the main blanket pattern. Once you have 4 loops on your hook, you can yarn over and pull back through everything and chain 1. Skip the next single crochet and work a cluster into the next. And you're basically just going to be working this all the way around. Remember, in the corners, you want to work a cluster, double crochet cluster, chain 3, double crochet cluster, all in that same corner space or that corner stitch. The beginning is a little bit different because we have to chain to start the round, and so that first cluster, that chain 3, already counted as a double crochet, which is why we only had to yarn over and pull back through two times. This one we had to do it 3 times to get those 3 double crochet clusters. And all the way around, you want to make sure you have the 3 double crochet together clusters. Skip 1, do another one. Now, if, depending on your tension, you find that the clusters are too close together on this border, you can skip 2 single crochets and just play around with how you like the look of that. So work this all the way around, and then I will show you how to join to finish round 2. So I wanted to show you what might happen at some of the corners depending on how many single crochets that you have worked for that round 1. So I finished this side. This is my first side of the double crochet clusters, chained 1, and now I'm at my corner. I'm going to skip this stitch. This is my single crochet number 1 from the first round. This is the middle stitch, so I technically have 2 stitches. I'm just going to skip both of those 2 and work the cluster corner into that middle stitch. So I've already chained 1, and I'm just going to work into that middle stitch, working the cluster, chain 3, and then putting another cluster into that same middle corner stitch. And so depending on how many single crochets you worked for round 1 on each side, you may have to kind of cheat like that. So I've actually skipped 2 right here. Again, not a big deal. So I've gone all the way around, and as you can see, I do have 2 stitches left in this round before I get to this join here, and that is totally fine. Also, I wanted to point out this stitch right here, it is a yarn eater. So this was a full cake of yarn that I was going to use for the border, and I am almost halfway through it already, only on 2 border rows. So make sure you have plenty of yarn for your border, because this one is a yarn eater. To finish off this second row, you're going to find that stitch right here, and you're just going to slip stitch. So it's the stitch that sits right on top of your cluster of double crochets there, and you just want to slip stitch. For row 3, or round 3 of the border, I should say, we are just going to work one more round of single crochets into every stitch all the way around. In the corners, so for this first corner we're going to slip stitch into the corner. I'm going to chain 1. I'm going to work 2 single crochets into that corner space, chain 1, and work 2 more single crochets right back into that corner space. And that is how we're going to work the corners. Every corner is going to be 2 single crochets into that chain space, chain 1, and 2 more single crochets right back into that chain space. And you're going to work that for each corner going around. In between, you're just going to single crochet into every stitch. So find your next stitch and single crochet. So very simple round 3 of the border. I've worked a single crochet into every stitch. I wanted to point out that it is perfectly fine to go in to the spaces in between those clusters from round 2 of our border. So instead of working into that actual stitch, you can certainly just work into that space. Here is where we started. I'm just going to stick a single crochet into that first stitch just to get over to this spot here, and slip stitch to join. I can cut my yarn, weave in all of my tails, and I will have a crib size blanket. I love how this yarn worked up. I love how the stitch pattern showcased that yarn. I love the color changes. I love the colors. I love everything about this blanket. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Until next time, everyone, happy crocheting. Bye!